History is a set of lies agreed upon. Napoleon Bonaparte said that. But what if the lie is not just about a battle, or a king, or a border? What if the lie is about everything? What if the very timeline we inhabit has been broken, reset, and rewritten? Look out your window. Look at the old buildings in your city. The post offices, the capitals, the cathedrals, the banks built in the 1800s. Look at their size. Look at their precision. We are told that these monolithic structures were built by men on horse and buggy, men who barely had electricity, men who hauled granite blocks weighing tons with nothing but ropes and pulleys. We are told they built these palaces of stone in 2 or 3 years, in the middle of muddy, unpaved streets, while fighting civil wars and surviving famines. Does that make sense to you? Or does it feel like a story invented to explain something that was already there? Welcome to the Abyss. Tonight we are going to pull at a loose thread in the fabric of history. A thread that once pulled threatens to unravel the entire tapestry of the modern world. We are speaking of Tartaria. And we are speaking of the event that wiped it away, the Great Mud Flood. Close your eyes. Let the noise of the present fade away. Let us walk back into the silence of the 19th century and ask the questions we were never supposed to ask.
The most compelling evidence for a hidden history is not buried in a secret vault in the Vatican. It is not hidden in a cave in Antarctica. It is standing right in front of you. It is the building you walk past on your way to work. It is the library where you studied as a child. Let us consider the architectural paradox of the 19th century. In the mid-1800s, across America, Europe, and Australia, we see an explosion of what historians call neoclassical or Greco-Roman architecture. We are talking about massive structures, state capitals with soaring domes, courthouses with 60-foot columns, public libraries with intricate marble arches. The official narrative tells us that these were built by settlers. Let's take the American West as an example. We are told that people arrived in covered wagons, escaping poverty, living in wooden shacks, struggling to find clean water. And yet, the history books claim that within a few years of arriving in these desolate places, these same settlers built structures that rival the temples of Rome and the palaces of St. Petersburg. Take a mental journey to Salt Lake City, Utah, the Salt Lake Temple. We are told construction began in 1853. This was a desert. There was no railroad to transport materials. The population was tiny, struggling for survival. Yet they supposedly quarried massive granite blocks from a canyon 20 miles away
transported them by ox cart, and constructed a Gothic masterpiece of absolute geometric perfection. A building that would require modern cranes, laser cutting tools, and advanced logistics to build today. And they did it, we are told, with chisels and faith.
Is it possible? Perhaps. But is it probable? Or is it more likely that the settlers didn't build these structures, but found them? This brings us to the phenomenon of the founding. In many historical documents, if you look closely at the language, cities are not described as being constructed. They are described as being founded. To found can mean to establish, yes, but it can also mean to discover, to find. What if the magnificent architecture of the 19th century was inherited? What if the settlers were actually inheritors, moving into the shell of a civilization that had recently perished? This leads us to the most physical, undeniable anomaly that you can verify yourself, perhaps even in your own neighborhood. It is the phenomenon of the mud flood windows. Walk through the historic district of any old city, New York, London, Paris, Moscow, Chicago. Look at the older buildings. You will notice something strange. The ground floor is often not at street level. You have to walk up a flight of stairs to get to the first floor. And below that first floor, there is another floor, half buried.
You see windows at the sidewalk level. Windows that are cut off by the pavement. Windows that look directly into the dirt. Architects will tell you this is a basement or a garden level designed for light. But look closer. Does it look designed? Why would an architect design a full-sized window with a lintel and an arch only to bury the bottom half of it in the earth? Why would you build a door that is half below the street? If you go inside these basements and dig down, you often find that the building keeps going. There are doors that open into soil. There are archways that lead nowhere. The evidence suggests that what we call the ground floor was originally the second floor. The original street level is 10, sometimes 20 feet below us. Something happened, a cataclysmic event that blanketed the world in soil, clay, and mud. It didn't destroy the buildings, it buried them. It raised the topography of the earth, turning the first floors of palaces into basements. And the people who came after, the survivors or the new settlers, they didn't dig the buildings out. They didn't have the machinery or the manpower. So they simply paved over the mud. They turned the second floor into the new entrance. They built stairs going up. And they forgot. This phenomenon is global. You find it in the Winter Palace in Russia. You find it in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. You find it in regular residential blocks
in San Francisco. It indicates a worldwide event, a sudden accumulation of soil that swallowed the bottom of our history. But who built these structures before the mud? The narrative we are given is fragmented. We are told the Romans built this, the Greeks built that, the Ottomans built this, the Victorians built that. But if you strip away the labels and look at the style, you see a unity. A column in the Supreme Court of the United States looks exactly like a column in the Pantheon of Paris, which looks exactly like a column in the ruins of Baalbek, which looks exactly like a column in a museum in St. Petersburg. There are domes, there are arches, there are spires, there is sacred geometry, there is a mastery of acoustics and vibration.
This was not a disconnected world of separate nations developing independently. The architecture suggests a unified, global civilization, a civilization that possessed advanced knowledge of engineering, masonry, and atmospheric energy, a civilization that was peaceful, prosperous, and incredibly advanced. And for the sake of this journey, we will call this civilization by the name found on the old maps, the name that was erased from the geography books in the 20th century: Grande Tartarie. But to understand the buildings, we must first look at the maps, because if you look at an encyclopedia from before the 1900s, the world looks very different. The borders are not where they should be. And there is a massive country, the largest in the world, sitting right in the middle of Eurasia, which simply disappeared.
To control the future, one must control the past. And to control the past, the first thing you must do is redraw the maps. We grow up trusting maps. We see the shapes of continents on our classroom walls, the colorful patches defining nations, and we assume this is how it has always been. We assume that if a country existed, it would be there. You cannot hide a country, can you? Especially not a country larger than the United States, China, and Europe combined. But if you step away from the modern textbooks and go back to the source material, the encyclopedias, the atlases, and the travel logs from the 17th, 18th, and even early 19th centuries, you find something that should not be there. You find a ghost. Let us look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, the first edition, published in 1771. This is not a fringe conspiracy blog. This is the standard of academic knowledge of its time. If you open Volume 3, page 887, you will find a description of a country called Tartarie. It reads, Tartarie, a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west. This is called Great Tartary. The Tartars lie south of Muscovy, and Siberia, northwest of China, north of India and Persia, and west of Ocean. A vast country, Great Tartarie.
Look at the maps from that era. Maps by highly respected cartographers like Guillaume de Liu or Gerardus Mercator. You will see Grande Tartarie or Tartaria Magna stretching from the Ural Mountains in the west all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the east, and from the Arctic Circle down to India and China. This was not a wasteland of nomadic tribes, as modern historians try to tell us. The maps show cities, hundreds of cities. Cities with names you have likely never heard of. Turfan, Kunkun, Kambalu, Tenduk. They are marked with the same symbols used for Paris or London. Symbols denoting major capitals, fortified walls, and cathedrals. The flag of Tartaria is documented in maritime charts of the 1800s. It displays an owl, or sometimes a griffin dragon, on a yellow background. An emperor is mentioned. A centralized government is implied. So, where did it go? If you look at a map today, that massive landmass is sliced up. It is absorbed into Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. The name Tartary has been demoted. Modern historians will tell you it was just a geographical term, like the Middle East or the Orient. They will say it referred to the region of the Mongol hordes, a loose collection of barbarians living in yurts. But does a loose collection of barbarians build cities that rival Rome? Does a geographical region have its own flag, its own emperor, and its own distinct architectural style that can be found in San Francisco, in Tokyo, in Moscow, and in Delhi?
The confusion, or perhaps the deception, lies in the difference between Tartary, the region, and Tartaria, the empire. There is evidence suggesting that Tartaria was not just a country in Asia, but a global federation, a world order that influenced the Americas as well. Look at the old maps of North America, maps from the 1600s and 1700s. You will often see California depicted not as part of the mainland, but as an island. Why? Cartographic error? Or was the geography different before the mud flood? More interestingly, look at the Pacific Northwest of America. In old atlases, this region is often unlabeled or labeled with names that sound suspiciously Tartarian. Some researchers believe that the Tartarian influence extended across the Bering Strait, which might have been a land bridge or a much narrower crossing, and down into the Americas. This creates a disturbing possibility for the history of the United States. We are taught the story of manifest destiny, the brave expansion from east to west. We are told the West was wild and empty, inhabited only by indigenous tribes living close to the land. But what if the expansion to the west was not an exploration, but a reclamation? What if the ghost cities that early explorers stumbled upon in the Grand Canyon, or the massive stone ruins in the deserts of Nevada, were not built by primitive ancestors, but were the remnants of the Tartarian presence in America?
Consider the world fairs of the late 19th century. San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis. We will dive deeper into these later, but for now, just ask yourself, why did these cities, supposedly new and raw, look exactly like the ancient capitals of Europe? The maps of Grande Tartarie suggest a connectivity that has been severed. They show a river system in Siberia that allowed for trade from the Arctic to the Indian Ocean, rivers that today are frozen or dried up. They imply a climate that was much warmer in the north than it is today. We see depictions of exotic animals, elephants, lions, and camels in regions of Russia that are now covered in snow and ice. This aligns with the discovery of frozen mammoths with fresh buttercups in their stomachs. It suggests a sudden, violent shift in climate, a shift that froze the north and buried the empire. By the mid-19th century, the maps began to change. Grande Tartarie is chopped up, independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Russian Tartary, and then, by the 20th century, the name vanishes completely. The CIA documents released recently, specifically a document from 1957 titled National Cultural Development Under Communism, actually mentioned the systematic rewriting of Tartar history.
The Council of Ministers of the USSR ordered the Department of Science of the Central Committee to focus on the question of rewriting the history of Tartaria, to eliminate references to Great Tartary, to falsify the true history. Why would the Soviet Union and the Western powers agree to erase a civilization? Perhaps because Tartaria represented something dangerous to the new order, a system of free energy, a spiritual understanding of the universe, or simply a rival power that had to be not just defeated, but obliterated from memory, so that the new inheritors could claim the world as their own creation. The maps are the smoking gun. They show us a world that was full, connected, and thriving right before the silence fell. But if a global empire existed, surely there would be physical evidence left behind, not just stone buildings, but evidence in the earth itself, evidence of the cataclysm that ended it. For that, we must look down. We must look at the dirt.
we must look at the layer of soil that blankets our world like a shroud.
We stand upon a graveyard. We walk down paved streets. We drive on asphalt highways. We plant gardens in our backyards, never realizing that the ground beneath our feet is not the original surface of the earth. It is a shroud, a thick, suffocating blanket of clay, soil, and silt that descended upon the world not millions of years ago, but merely yesterday in the eyes of history. We have spoken of the architecture, the windows peeking out from the sidewalks, gasping for air. We have spoken of the maps, the empire that vanished. Now we must speak of the event itself, the weapon, the catastrophe. The Great Mud Flood. The term mud flood sounds simplistic, perhaps even childish. It evokes images of a river overflowing its banks or a landslide on a hilly hill. But what the evidence suggests is not a localized disaster. It is a global phenomenon of soil liquefaction or atmospheric deposition. Imagine a world where the solid ground turns into a viscous wave, a tsunami not of water, but of earth. It doesn't crash and retreat like the tide. It flows, it fills, and it settles. It swallows the ground floors of cities. It buries roads. It suffocates the landscape. And when it hardens, it changes the topography of the planet forever.
Mainstream archaeologists have a term for the buried sections of old cities. They call it the cultural layer. They teach us that over centuries, dirt, trash, and dust naturally accumulate. They say that humans just keep paving over the old roads, raising the street level inch by inch. They tell us that in London or Rome or Paris, the street level today is 10 to 20 feet higher than it was in the 1600s because of accumulation. Does this explanation satisfy you? Think about your own driveway. Think about the road in front of your house. If you don't sweep it for a year, does the dirt rise by a foot? If you leave it for 50 years, will your front door be buried? Of course not. Rain washes dirt away. Wind scatters it. Cities do not naturally bury themselves in sediment. They are kept clean by their inhabitants. The cultural layer explanation is a convenient lie used to dismiss the impossible reality that at some point in the mid-19th century, massive amounts of soil appeared out of nowhere. Let us look at the Polytechnic Museum in Moscow, a magnificent building. For decades, people walked into the ground floor entrance, looked at the windows, and thought nothing of it. But recently, during a major renovation, excavators dug down around the foundation to reinforce it.
What they found shocked the independent research community. They found that the building did not end at the street. It kept going down, 5 meters down. And it wasn't just a foundation. They found full-sized arched windows, complete with glass panes. They found elaborate brickwork. They found doorways. They found a ground floor that was grander and taller than the floor above it. Why would an architect build a beautiful sunlit gallery 5 meters underground, facing nothing but solid dirt? The answer is terrifyingly simple. When that building was built, that floor was not underground. It was at street level. The dirt arrived later. This is not unique to Russia. Travel to Seattle, Washington, the famous Seattle Underground. The tour guides will tell you a charming story. They will say the city was built too low. It was swampy, and the toilets backed up at high tide. So, after the Great Fire of 1889, the city leaders decided to raise the streets. They built retaining walls on the sides of the roads, filled them in, and paved over the second story. The original ground floor became the basement. It sounds plausible until you look at the logistics.
Do you understand the effort required to raise an entire city's grade by 12 to 20 feet in 1889? With horses and wagons, you would need millions of tons of fill dirt. Where did it come from? Who moved it? Where are the photographs of this monumental engineering feat? There are photos of the aftermath, people walking on raised wooden planks, storefronts half buried. But there are suspiciously few photos of the process. Perhaps they didn't raise the streets. Perhaps the streets were raised for them by a cataclysm, and they simply built on top of the disaster. They call it the underground to monetize it, to turn a crime scene into a tourist attraction. Look at Omaha, Nebraska. Look at Kansas City. Look at Chattanooga, Tennessee. They all have underground districts. They all have the same anomaly: intricate brick buildings, perfectly constructed, sitting deep below the current soil line. We see photographs from the mid to late 1800s, the era of the Civil War in America and similar periods in Europe. We see something chilling. We see excavation.
We are told they are building the railways. We are told they are grading the roads. But look closely at the photos. You see men with shovels standing next to massive mounds of dirt that tower over them. They are digging out the tracks. They are digging out the roads. The tracks are often already there, buried under the mud. There is a theory that the extensive railway networks of the 19th century, the Trans-Siberian, the Transcontinental, were not built by us. They were recovered by us. We found the iron ribbons buried in the mud, and we spent decades digging them out, claiming the achievement as our own. But what caused this? The theories are varied, and all of them are frightening. Some speak
of soil liquefaction caused by a massive vibration. If you shake a bowl of wet sand, the heavy objects sink. If the Earth was subjected to a high-frequency weapon or a planetary resonance event, the solid ground would turn to liquid. Massive stone buildings would sink into the earth like stones in a pond, stopping only when the vibration ceased. This explains why the buildings aren't crushed, but simply submerged.
Others speak of a micronova or a plasma event from the sun, interacting with the Earth's electromagnetic field, causing instant, massive dust storms and mud rains that blanketed the hemisphere. Whatever the cause, the timing seems to cluster around the 1840s to the 1860s, a period of chaos, revolutions in Europe, the Civil War in America, the Taiping Rebellion in China. History books tell us these were political wars, but were they cover-ups? Were they wars for survival in the aftermath of a reset? And this leads us to the darkest question of all. If the mud rose 20 feet high, where are the people? If a tsunami of earth hits a city, you cannot outrun it. You cannot swim in it. If the ground floor is buried, everyone on the ground floor is buried with it. The mud flood suggests a mass casualty event of biblical proportions, a reset of the human population. This explains the emptiness.
Look at the earliest photographs of major cities. St. Petersburg in 1860, San Francisco in 1865, Paris, London. The architecture is there, the massive cathedrals are there, the wide boulevards are there, but the streets are empty. It looks like a ghost world. You see a city designed for 1 million people, but you only see 3 guys standing on a corner, a horse and carriage, and a stray dog. The scale is off. The people look like ants wandering through the ruins of giants. Historians say, oh, that's because of the long exposure time of the old cameras. Moving people didn't show up. It is a valid argument to a point. But we have photos with short exposure times, where the water in the river is frozen in motion, yet the streets are still empty. We have panoramic shots of Moscow, where there is not a single soul in a city that should be bustling. It feels as if the city survived, but the population did not.
And those who were left, the survivors, they were traumatized. They were few. They were living in the attics, digging tunnels between the buried buildings. They were a post-apocalyptic society inheriting a high-tech world they no longer understood. And then, suddenly, a new population appeared, a population of children. We arrive at one of the strangest and most heartbreaking chapters of this hidden history. Following the mud flood,
the world saw an explosion of foundlings, train cars filled with babies, asylums overflowing with orphans, industrial schools springing up in every major city. Where did all these children come from? Where were their parents? We are told it was disease. We are told it was poverty. But the numbers don't add up. Welcome to the era of the orphan trains.
History is usually told through the eyes of the victors, but the history of the 19th century should be told through the eyes of the orphans. We have spoken of the silent cities, the grand boulevards of Paris and Washington, D.C., paved in cobblestone, lined with palaces, yet hauntingly devoid of life in the early photographs. We have spoken of the mud that swallowed the lower floors. Now we must address the population that emerged from that silence. If you look at the census data and the social records of the mid to late 1800s, you encounter a statistical anomaly that chills the blood. There was a surplus of children. Not a small increase. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of children. Children without parents. Children wandering the streets of New York, London, Berlin, and Moscow. Children filling the workhouses. Where did they all come from? The official narrative tells us that life was hard. Disease was rampant. Mothers died in childbirth. Fathers died in factories. Poverty was the culprit. But does poverty alone explain the sudden appearance of massive institutions designed solely to process children on an industrial scale? This brings us to one of the most bizarre and overlooked operations in American history, the orphan trains. Between 1854 and 1929, it is estimated that over 250,000 children were transported from the coastal cities of the East, New York and Boston, to the rural Midwest and the West. They were loaded onto trains, tagged like cattle, and shipped out to places like Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. We are told this was a humanitarian effort by organizations like the Children's Aid Society. They claimed they were saving these children from the squalor of the city and giving them a wholesome life on a farm. But look closer at the accounts of these trips. When the train stopped in a town, the children were lined up on a platform or a stage. The local farmers would inspect them. They would check their teeth. They would squeeze their muscles. They weren't looking for sons and daughters. They were looking for labor. Siblings were separated. Names were changed. Their pasts were erased.
In the Tartaria theory, the orphan trains take on a much darker significance. If a cataclysm, the mud flood, had wiped out the adult population, or a significant portion of it, these children were the survivors, or perhaps they were the repopulation stock. They were being moved from the foundling asylums of the East to the empty territories of the West to repopulate the ghost cities and dig them out of the mud. These children were the labor force that built the late 19th century. Look at the photos of the factories. Look at the mines. Look at the textile mills. Who is working the machines? Who is crawling into the tight spaces? Children. We are told this was just the cruelty of the Victorian era, but perhaps it was a necessity. Perhaps there were no adults left to do the work. And then there is the matter of the incubators. This is where the story drifts from tragedy into science fiction.
Visit a World's Fair in the late 1800s or early 1900s, the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis. Amidst the technological wonders and the displays of foreign cultures, there was always a very specific, very popular attraction: the infant incubators. Crowds of people would pay admission to walk through a sterile ward and look at premature babies in glass boxes. We are told this was the work of Dr. Martin Cooney, a way to fund medical research for premature infants because hospitals refused to treat them. But the photos are unsettling. There are rows and rows of these babies, and the question arises, why were there so many premature babies at a fairground? Were they really premature, or were they something else? Some theorists propose a disturbing possibility, that these were repopulation centers, that in the wake of the reset, technology was used to mass produce or artificially gestate a new generation of humans to inhabit the empty world. It sounds impossible, yet we see the postcards. We harvest babies in the cabbage patch. The folklore of the stork bringing babies. The sheer volume of foundlings with no known origin. This new generation, the orphans, the train riders, the incubator babies, they were the inheritors.
They inherited a world they did not build. Imagine you are one of these children. You are put on a train in New York. You arrive in a city like Omaha or Salt Lake. You see buildings that are massive. The doorways are 12 feet high. The ceilings are 30 feet high. The steps are cut for the stride of a giant. You are small. The world is too big for you. You walk into a state capitol building or a cathedral. The acoustics are perfect. The temperature is regulated without modern air conditioning. The craftsmanship is beyond anything you have ever seen. And the adults, the few controllers who run the orphanages and the schools, tell you, we built this with our horses and our wagons and our chisels. We built this last year. You believe them because you are a child. You have no memory of what came before. You have no parents to tell you the truth.
This is how the history was rewritten, not by burning books, but by severing the lineage, by creating a generation gap so wide that the knowledge of the old world fell into the abyss.
These children grew up to be our great-grandparents. They were taught a new timeline. They were taught that the Greco-Roman buildings were just a revival style. They were taught that the star forts were just old military bases. They were taught that the mud-buried windows were just architectural choices. They worked hard. They paved over the mud. They installed new, inferior wiring into the walls of the palaces to bring in their crude DC electricity, unaware that the buildings might have once powered themselves wirelessly. They were the squatters in the ruins of a higher civilization. Look at the photographs of the construction of these great buildings. You will often find something missing. You see the scaffolding, you see the finished building, but you rarely see the construction itself. You don't see the foundation being poured. You don't see the quarrying of the stone. You see a completed dome with some wooden scaffolding wrapped around it and men standing there posing for a photo. Were they building it, or were they repairing it? Were they simply whitewashing the soot from the old world to make it look new?
The orphan trains moved the workforce. The schools erased the memory. And the empty cities were filled with a new, obedient population who would never question the nature of their reality. But the inheritors didn't just inherit stone and brick. They inherited the world fairs. These events, which supposedly cost millions of dollars and took years to plan, were temporary cities built of plaster and hemp, only to be destroyed 6 months later. Or so we are told. What if the world fairs were not temporary? What if they were the last functioning capitals of the Tartarian Empire, opened up to the public one last time before being systematically demolished to hide the technology of the past? Come with me now. Let us buy a ticket to the White City. Let us walk through the gates of the Chicago World's Fair of 1893.
Imagine a city of marble, a city where the buildings are not just structures, but mountains of white stone crowned with golden domes and statues of winged victories. Canals filled with electric gondolas wind through the streets. At night, millions of light bulbs, a technology barely understood by the masses, illuminate the skyline, turning night into day. Is this Rome at the height of its power? Is this Atlantis? No, this is Chicago in 1893. We are told that this place, the world's Columbian Exposition, was a temporary festival. We are told that this sprawling metropolis of neoclassic majesty, covering nearly 700 acres, featuring over 200 massive buildings, was built in less than 2 years. And we are told that it was built to be thrown away. This is the riddle of the world fairs. From Chicago to St. Louis, from San Francisco to Buffalo, the late 19th century saw a bizarre phenomenon. The government would announce a fair. They would select a site, often a swamp or a wasteland, and then, in an impossibly short amount of time, a city would rise that rivaled the capitals of Europe.
Let us look closer at the Chicago World's Fair, the White City. The scale of these buildings is hard to comprehend. The manufacturers and liberal arts building alone was massive enough to fit the Great Pyramid of Egypt inside it. It required 17 million feet of lumber and 12 million pounds of steel. The central dome of the administration building was larger than the dome of the U.S. Capitol. We are expected to believe that men with handsaws, hammers, and horses built this entire complex in the middle of a harsh Chicago winter. But here is the catch. Historians tell us, oh, it wasn't real stone. It was staff. Staff is a mixture of plaster of Paris, hemp, and horsehair, a temporary facade meant to look like stone. They say the buildings were essentially big sheds covered in this plaster icing. But does this withstand scrutiny? First, consider the weather. Chicago is known as the Windy City. It has brutal winters, driving rains, and high humidity from the lake. Would a city made of plaster and hemp survive 2 years of construction and 6 months of exhibition without dissolving, cracking, or crumbling?
Look at the photographs. The details are exquisite. The statues are anatomically perfect. The columns are fluted with machine-like precision. If you tap on a plaster wall, it sounds hollow. It feels temporary. Yet millions of visitors walked through these arches, touched these walls. Did no one notice they were walking through a papier-mâché movie set? And then there is the infrastructure. These temporary cities had fully functioning sewage systems, water filtration plants, and most incredibly, electrical grids that were more advanced than the actual cities next door. In 1893, most of America was still using gas lamps and candles. Yet the White City was bathed in the light of hundreds of thousands of Westinghouse bulbs. It had moving walkways, an early version of the escalator. It had electric rail systems. Why would you invest the equivalent of billions of dollars to install cutting-edge infrastructure into a city made of glue and fake stone, only to tear it all down 6 months later? It happened during the Panic of 1893, a severe economic depression. Banks were failing, people were starving, yet the government found the money to build a fantasy city and then destroy it? The Tartaria theory offers a different explanation.
The World Fairs were not construction projects. They were restoration projects. These sites were the ruins of the old Tartarian cities. The White City was perhaps the regional capital of the civilization that lived there before the reset. The construction photos we see, which are surprisingly few and far between, show scaffolding, yes. But are they building the structure? Or are they simply repairing the facade? Are they applying the staff not to create the building, but to cover up the weathering of the ancient stone, to make it look new and uniform? The fair was a conditioning event. It was a way to introduce the population, the inheritors and the orphans, to the technology of the past, but framed as a discovery of the future. They showed them electricity. They showed them incubators. They showed them the grandeur of the old world. And then the final act, the fire. Almost every major world fair ended in a fire. The Chicago World's Fair burned down in July 1894. The San Francisco Crystal Palace burned. The New York Crystal Palace burned. Why?
Because you cannot let the people keep the palaces. If they stayed, people would start to ask questions. Why can't we build like this anymore? Why is the temporary building better than our permanent city hall? They had to be destroyed. The evidence had to be erased. The rubble was carted away or pushed into the lake. But they missed a spot. There is one building from the Panama Pacific International Exposition of 1915 in San Francisco that was not destroyed. The Palace of Fine Arts. It was supposed to be demolished, but a preservation league fought to save it. The officials claimed it was just plaster and wood and would fall apart in a few years anyway. It is still standing today. It has stood for over 100 years. It has survived earthquakes. It is massive. It is majestic. And while it has required restoration, the core structure was clearly not just a temporary stage prop. Its survival is a glitch in the matrix. It stands as a silent witness to what the rest of the fair looked like.
If the Palace of Fine Arts was real, then the Tower of Jewels was real. The Court of the Universe was real. And they destroyed it all. There is another dark aspect to these fairs. The human zoos. Amidst the Greco-Roman splendor, the organizers set up exhibits of primitive people. They brought in Native Americans, African tribes, Polynesians, and Filipinos. They displayed them in mud huts wearing loincloths. The contrast was intentional. The narrative was clear. Look at these savages in their huts, and look at us, the civilized white man, in our marble palaces. We are the pinnacle of evolution. It was a psychological operation. by juxtaposing the primitive with the Tartarian architecture, which they claimed as their own. The controllers cemented the idea of linear progress. They hid the fact that the savages might have been the survivors of the same world that built the palaces, now stripped of their heritage.
And amidst the lights and the statues, the visitors marveled at the magic of the fair. They saw fountains that sprayed illuminated water. They saw wireless energy demonstrations. They saw machines that hummed with a quiet power. They called it innovation, but those who study the Lost Empire call it Antiquitech. The world fairs were the last hurrah of a technology that harnessed the ether. A technology that did not require burning coal or oil. A technology that used the very shape of the buildings to pull energy from the atmosphere. And once the fairs burned, that technology was withdrawn, patented, and sold back to us in the form of metered electricity. Let us step away from the fire and look at the buildings themselves. Let us look at the spires, the domes, and the metal poles that top every Tartarian structure. They were not just decorations, they were antennas.
Look at the skyline of any old city. Prague, St. Petersburg, Florence, or even the older districts of New York. What do you see? You see domes, you see spires, you see obelisks, you see intricate metalwork reaching up into the clouds. We are told that these are religious symbols. We are told the church steeples point to heaven to remind us of God. We are told the domes are just an aesthetic choice of the Renaissance. We are told the copper roofs are just expensive roofing. But what if we are looking at a circuit board? What if the architecture of the old world was not designed just to house people, but to power them? Welcome to the world of Antiquitech.
The central premise of the Tartaria theory is that the civilization before the reset had a fundamentally different understanding of physics. Today, we live in the age of combustion. We burn coal. We burn oil. We burn gas. We explode atoms. We take something physical, destroy it, and harvest the heat. It is a violent, finite, and dirty form of energy. But the old world lived in the age of the ether. Before Einstein and the modern scientific consensus, scientists believed in the ether, an invisible, omnipresent medium that filled the universe, carrying light and electromagnetic waves. It was the ocean in which the earth swam, and this ocean was charged with energy. Atmospheric electricity.
If you go up in altitude, the voltage potential of the air increases. The sky is a battery. The ground is the negative terminal. If you can connect the two, you have a flow of current. Now, look at the cathedrals again.
They are heavy stone structures, granite or limestone, which contain quartz. Quartz is piezoelectric. It generates a charge when under pressure. The massive weight of the cathedral presses down on the stones. Then look at the metal. Iron braces inside the stone, copper roofs on top, gold leaf on the domes. Gold and copper are the best conductors we know. And finally, the spire, the needle, the antenna. It reaches up high into the atmosphere. It is often tipped with a complex geometric shape, a cross, a star, a crescent, or a ball. We call them religious icons, but in the language of electrical engineering, they look suspiciously like capacitors and receivers. The theory suggests that these buildings were massive machines. They pulled static electricity from the ether, channeled it down through the copper domes and iron rods, and concentrated it into the building. But what did they do with this power?
They didn't have wall sockets. They didn't have iPhones. They had wireless resonance. Imagine a city where the streetlights didn't have wires. We see photos from the 1800s of arc lamps, incredibly bright lights that illuminate entire town squares. No power lines are visible. We are told they were gas, but gas flickers. These lights are blindingly white. Imagine a home where the fireplace didn't burn wood. Walk into an old Victorian mansion or a castle. Look at the fireplace. It is grand. It has a massive metal backplate, and often there are two metal androns, the stands for the wood, that look like metallic spheres or nodes. Many researchers have noticed that in these old palaces, there is no soot in the chimney. There is no evidence of centuries of burning logs.
What if the fireplace was actually an ether place, a localized ionization unit? The metal backplate connected to the rebar in the walls, which connected to the dome on the roof. The antenna pulled the charge down, and the fireplace radiated heat, pure, clean, radiant heat without a single flame. It sounds like magic, but to a caveman, an iPhone is magic. Nikola Tesla, the genius who supposedly invented the 20th century, openly spoke of getting energy from the wheelwork of nature. He built the Wardenclyffe Tower, a massive spire designed to transmit wireless energy globally. Mainstream history tells us Tesla was a lone genius, a mutant of intellect who appeared out of nowhere. But look at the Wardenclyffe Tower. Then look at the Eiffel Tower. Look at the Tower of Jewels at the San Francisco World's Fair. Look at the minarets of the Hagia Sophia. They are the same technology. Tesla didn't invent it. He rediscovered it. He was trying to turn the power back on. He was trying to tap into the grid that had been shut down.
And that is why he was stopped. J.P. Morgan and the industrialists of the new era famously asked, "If it's wireless, where do I put the meter? You cannot charge money for air. You cannot monopolize the ether." So the decision was made. The Antiquitech had to go. The beautiful copper domes were stripped. The metal spires were removed or grounded. The radium heaters were replaced with coal furnaces. The narrative was changed. That's not a machine, it's a church. That's not an antenna, it's a cross. We moved from a civilization of abundance and harmony with nature to a civilization of scarcity and explosion. We built ugly wooden poles and strung dangerous wires across our cities. We dug holes in the ground to dig up black sludge. We polluted our air. We paid our monthly bills. But clues remain. Have you ever looked at a rose window in a Gothic cathedral? Stained glass, complex Cymatics patterns. Beautiful, yes. But in physics, a magnetron, the device that powers your microwave and radar, looks exactly like a rose window. A central hole surrounded by resonating cavities. If you blast sound frequencies or electromagnetic waves through a rose window, does it change the vibration of the room? Were these cathedrals healing centers, places where the frequency was tuned to 432 Hertz or 528 Hertz to regenerate the human body? There are stories of the pipe organs, massive instruments built into the structure of the cathedrals. We think of them as musical instruments, but sound is vibration. Vibration is energy. When a massive pipe organ plays the low notes, the whole building shakes. The quartz in the stone compresses. The field activates. Was the music the key to turning on the machine? And then there are the obelisks,
Egypt, Washington, D.C., Vatican City, London, Paris. Why are there Egyptian obelisks in the center of all these modern Western power centers? They are granite needles, monolithic, extremely heavy. We are told they are monuments, but they are always placed at the center of star-shaped intersections or on top of powerful ley lines, energy lines of the Earth. They act as acupuncture needles for the planet. They stabilize the grid. The civilization of Tartaria understood the Earth not as a rock hurtling through space, but as a living electrical system. They built their cities to amplify that system. But the most powerful machines of all were not the cathedrals, they were the fortresses. If you look at the map of the world, from the Netherlands to Japan, from India to the Americas, you find a specific type of structure that defies explanation by conventional warfare.
The Star Forts. Geometric masterpieces of earth and stone. Perfect stars. 5 points, 6 points, 12 points, surrounded by water. Historians say these are military bases designed to deflect cannonballs. But if you look at them from above, a view the builders supposedly never had, they don't look like bunkers. They look like snowflakes. They look like cymatics, the pattern sound makes in water. And most importantly, they look like the circuitry of a motherboard.
If you fly a drone over the Netherlands, or the coast of Florida, or the plains of Japan, you might stumble upon something that looks like a mistake in the matrix. You see a shape in the landscape. It is not natural. It is perfect. A star. These are the star forts. There are thousands of them scattered across the globe. Some are famous, like the Statue of Liberty stands on one, Fort Wood. Some are overgrown with jungles in India. Some are buried under modern cities in Europe. They are defined by their complex fractal geometry, star shapes inside star shapes, walls made of brick and earth, surrounded by moats of water. Mainstream historians have a very specific explanation for these. They call it the Bastion Fort, or Trace Italienne. They say that in the 1500s, when cannons became powerful, the old medieval castle walls were too flat and brittle, so military engineers designed these stars. The angled walls would deflect cannonballs. The crossfire angles allowed soldiers to shoot at anyone attacking the walls.
It is a logical, tactical explanation. It makes sense on paper. But when you look at the reality of these structures, the military explanation begins to crumble like old plaster. First, the scale. Many of these forts are enormous. They encompass entire cities like Palmanova in Italy or Noordan in the Netherlands. To build one of these in the 16th or 17th century would require moving millions of tons of earth. It would require a level of geometric precision that is difficult to achieve even with modern GPS. If you are a military commander building a defense against cannons, Do you really need to make the wall a perfect fractal snowflake? Do you need to align the points of the star to the constellations? Do you need to use sacred geometry that is pleasing to the eye from 10,000 feet in the air, a view no human had at the time? Or is it possible that defense was a secondary function, that the survivors of the reset found these structures, saw big walls, and said, "Hey, let's put some cannons on top and call it a fort"? This brings us to the theory of cymatics.
Cymatics is the study of visible sound. If you take a metal plate, sprinkle sand on it, and vibrate it with a violin bow or a sound frequency generator, the sand will organize itself. It doesn't just make a mess, it forms beautiful, complex geometric patterns, stars, hexagons, mandalas. The higher the frequency, the more complex the pattern. Now look at a star fort from above. Then look at a cymatic pattern created by water vibrating at a specific frequency. They are identical. This suggests a startling possibility. The star forts were not built for war. They were built by frequency, or for frequency. Were they massive harmonizers?
Tartaria was a civilization of water and sound. Almost every star fort is surrounded by water, a moat, or built next to a major river or ocean. Water is the great conductor. It carries vibration better than air. The theory proposes that these forts were actually power plants or healing centers for the earth itself. The unique shape of the walls acted as a waveguide. It trapped, amplified, and focused the electromagnetic energy of the earth, the telluric currents. The water in the moats would vibrate at the frequency of the star. This vibration would then radiate out into the surrounding water table, structuring the water. Structured water is better for farming, better for drinking, and perhaps energetic enough to power the etheric devices we discussed in the last chapter. Think of the star fort not as a bunker, but as a massive crystal radio receiver tuned to the heartbeat of the planet. This explains their global distribution. You don't find them just in strategic military choke points. You find them in the middle of nowhere. You find them in places that make no sense for a battle, but perfect sense for a power grid node. And you find them in the Americas, long before Columbus supposedly arrived.
Official history says the Europeans brought the design to America. But look at the mounds of the Mississippi culture. Look at the ancient earthworks in Ohio. They are complex geometric shapes, circles, octagons, and stars. Did the Native Americans build bastion forts to deflect cannons they didn't have? Or were these the overgrown ruins of the ancient grid, long abandoned before the settlers arrived? The Statue of Liberty is the most famous example. We are told the statue was a gift from France, and the base, Fort Wood, was an old War of 1812 fort. But look at the base. It is an 11-pointed star. An 11-pointed star is incredibly difficult to draw, let alone build with massive stone blocks. Why 11? It's an odd number, irregular. It has no military advantage over a square or a pentagon. But in frequency physics, 11 is a master number. Did the statue come later? Was the fort actually an ancient energy pedestal, and the Freemasons of the 19th century simply plopped their goddess Columbia, Isis or Libertas, on top of the existing machinery to claim it? The destruction of the star forts is another clue.
After the reset, during the 19th and 20th centuries, there was a concerted effort to destroy these beautiful structures. They were bulldozed to make way for highways. They were blown up during world wars, convenient excuses to destroy Antiquitech. But the ones that remain are silent witnesses to a physics we have lost. There is a star fort in Haiti. There are star forts in Japan, Goryeo-Kuku. There are star forts in Siberia. It was a one-world grid. Imagine a world where these stars hummed with a low violet energy. The water in the moats glowed. The air inside the star was charged, healthy and vibrant. No disease, no shortage, just resonance. And then the frequency changed. The hum stopped. The water went stagnant. The mud came.
The survivors crawled onto the walls. They didn't know what the star was for. They only knew the walls were thick. So they dragged their primitive cannons up the slopes. They turned the power plant into a slaughterhouse. They turned the generator into a tomb. And thus, the fort was born in the history books. But the destruction wasn't just about neglecting the technology. It was about actively suppressing it. And nowhere is this suppression more evident, more violent, and more tragic than in the story of the city that saw the end of the world. We must leave the stars now and travel to the west coast of America, to the Paris of the West, to the city that had to be burned to the ground because it showed too much of the truth. San Francisco, 1906. They call it an earthquake. But when you look at the photos, the buildings don't look like they shook apart. They look like they were blown up.
They called it the Paris of the West. If you look at photographs of San Francisco taken in 1870 or 1880, you do not see a shanty town built by gold miners and rough prospectors. You do not see wooden saloons and muddy streets. You see Rome. You see massive stone castles. You see a city hall with a dome higher than the Capitol in Washington. You see mansions on Nob Hill that look like they were airlifted from the heart of the French Empire. We are told that this city, this magnificent metropolis of stone and marble, was built in just 20 or 30 years during the gold rush by men who arrived on ships with nothing but pickaxes. Does that timeline make sense to you? Or does it look like they moved into a city that was already there? A city of the 7 hills, just like Rome. A key port of the Tartarian Empire on the edge of the Pacific. But you cannot hide a city that big. You cannot explain away the giant doorways and the Antiquitech spires forever. The narrative was becoming too hard to control. The contrast between the primitive settlers and the godlike architecture was too obvious. And so, the decision was made. It had to go.
On the morning of April 18, 1906, the ground shook. History tells us it was the Great Earthquake, a natural disaster, a tragedy. The gas mains ruptured, fires broke out, and for 3 days the city burned. But let us look at the testimony of the survivors. Let us look at the photographs of the ruins, and let us look at the actions of the U.S. Army. The official story is that the fires were started by ham and eggs, a woman cooking breakfast on a stove that tipped over. A convenient story, a simple story. But almost immediately after the shaking stopped, the military took control of the city. Brigadier General Frederick Funston, without waiting for orders from Washington, declared martial law. And what was the first thing the army did? Did they fight the fires? Did they rescue the trapped civilians? No, they started blowing up buildings.
They called it creating fire breaks. The logic was that if they demolished the buildings in the path of the fire would run out of fuel. But look at the map of the destruction. They were dynamiting buildings blocks away from the fire. They were dynamiting buildings that were made of stone and brick, buildings that would not easily burn. They were dynamiting the mansions of the wealthy and the palaces of the downtown district. Witnesses reported seeing soldiers going into untouched buildings, planting explosives and bringing them down. They weren't stopping the fire, they were feeding it. In fact, the fire breaks were often created using black powder, which is incendiary. The dynamite itself started new fires. The army essentially bombed their own city. Why? If you accept the Tartaria hypothesis, the answer is chillingly clear. The earthquake was the cover. The fire was the method. The goal was demolition. They needed to destroy the old world evidence. They needed to level the giant stone structures that betrayed the true history of the region. Look at the photos of the aftermath.
The City Hall, a massive domed structure. In the photos, it stands like a skeleton. The dome is stripped of its copper skin, the conductor. The columns are shattered. It doesn't look like it burned. Stone doesn't burn. It looks like it was shelled by artillery. It looks like Dresden or Hiroshima. Look at the panoramic shots of the city after the smoke cleared. It is leveled, flattened. The only things standing are the steel frames of the few modern buildings they had started to construct. The ancient masonry, pulverized. And strangest of all, the bricks. In a normal fire, a brick building might collapse, but the bricks remain bricks. You have a pile of rubble. But in the photos of San Francisco, you see clear streets. You see dust. Where did the millions of tons of rubble go? Some researchers suggest the use of directed energy technology or high-grade explosives that turned the masonry into dust, similar to the anomalies seen at the World Trade Center.
But the most damning piece of evidence is the insurance job theory, which leads us back to the reset. Before 1906, San Francisco was uninsurable for earthquakes, but it was insured for fire. By turning an earthquake, natural event, into a fire, man-made event, the devastation could be monetized. But more importantly, it allowed for a clean slate. The Great Rebuilding. Just as quickly as the city was destroyed, it was rebuilt. But it was not rebuilt as it was. The grand Tartarian style was replaced. The spires were gone. The domes were fewer. The streets were regridded. The architecture became modern, utilitarian, square, safe. They built a new city on top of the corpse of the old one.
This pattern is not unique to San Francisco. We see it in the Great Fire of Chicago, 1871, the Great Fire of Boston, 1872, the Great Fire of Seattle, 1889. Notice the dates. They all happened within a 40-year window. The same window as the Orphan trains, the same window as the rewriting of the maps. It was a systematic purge. City by city, the evidence of the great empire was burned out. They blamed a cow kicking over a lantern. They blamed a cooking fire. They blamed an earthquake. But the result was always the same. The magnificent stone legacy of the past was erased, and a new, controllable, meterable world was built in its place. And what of the people who remembered? By 1906, the original generation of the founding was dying out. The new generation, the orphans, were now adults. They were told, "Oh, that was just the old city hall. It was dangerous. It was built poorly. We are building something better."
They believed it. But there is one photo that haunts the researchers of the Lost Empire. It is a photo taken days after the fire. It shows a group of well-dressed men standing on a hill, looking down at the burning ruin of San Francisco. They are not crying. They are not panicked. They are smiling. They look like architects surveying a cleared lot. They look like men who have just successfully completed a demolition contract. San Francisco was the last stronghold of the Tartarian presence in the West. With its fall, the conquest was complete. The Pacific Rim was secured. The history books could now be finalized.
The Wild West was tamed, not by cowboys, but by dynamite. But even fire cannot destroy everything. There are things buried deep in the basements of San Francisco that survived. Tunnels, foundations, and the memory of a time when the city on the bay glowed with the light of the ether, long before the Golden Gate Bridge was ever drawn on paper. The destruction of the physical world was nearly complete. But there was one more step needed to finalize the reset. They had to destroy the mental world. They had to change the way we measure time, the way we understand geography, and the way we perceive our own potential. They had to rewrite the books.
Walk up the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Walk into the narthex of St. Peter's Basilica. Stand in the doorway of the Pantheon in Paris. Look up. The door handles are often positioned above your head. The steps are steep, forcing you to lift your legs higher than is comfortable. The ceiling soars 50, 60, 100 feet above you. You feel small. You feel like a child wandering through a house that does not belong to you. Mainstream architects tell us this is designed for grandeur. They say the builders wanted to make you feel insignificant in the face of God or the state. They say the 20-foot doors were for ventilation or to allow ceremonial flags to pass through. But form usually follows function. You do not build a house for a giraffe if you are a mouse. You build for the inhabitant. The Tartaria theory poses a simple biological question. What if the buildings were big because the people were big? We are entering the realm of the giants, the Nephilim, the Titans. In the official history of human evolution, we are told that we have gotten taller over time. We are told that ancient man was short,
malnourished and weak. But the photographic evidence from the 19th century, the twilight of the Tartarian era, suggests the exact opposite. We see photos of the last giants, men and women of extraordinary height, standing 7, 8, sometimes 9 feet tall. We are told they were freaks of nature, sufferers of gigantism or acromegaly. They were put in circuses. They were mocked. But look at their proportions. A person with gigantism usually looks frail. Their bones can't support their weight. They need canes. They are in pain. But the giants in the old photos, they look strong. They are well proportioned. They look like warriors. They look like a distinct species or a subspecies that was slowly dying out. There is a famous photo from the Russo-Japanese War, or perhaps earlier in the late 1800s. It shows a Japanese banker standing next to a Tartar giant. The giant is nearly 9 feet tall. He is holding a teacup that looks like a thimble in his hand. He doesn't look sick. He looks majestic. If Tartaria was a global civilization, was it a civilization of mixed sizes? Look at the art, the Renaissance paintings. We see angels and heroes who are twice the size of the normal humans around them. We interpret this as artistic hierarchy, making the important people bigger. But what if it was literal? What if the ruling class, the architects, the master masons of the old world were physically superior to us?
This explains the impossible masonry. We marvel at the pyramids, at Baalbek, at the polygonal walls of Peru. We ask, how did they move these 100-ton stones? We invent complex theories about ramps, pulleys, and thousands of slaves. But if the builder was 12 feet tall and possessed strength 5 times that of a modern man, moving a stone block becomes much less of a mystery. The tools found in some quarries are massive, hammers that no normal man could swing, books that no normal man could hold. Yes, the books. In museums around the world, hidden in the back rooms or sometimes displayed as novelties, are the giant codices. Massive, leather-bound manuscripts that are 3 feet tall. To read one, a modern human has to stand up and walk from one side of the page to the other. Why would you write a book that is impossible to hold? Unless, of course, it was the size of a paperback to you. And then there is the physical evidence buried in the soil, the bones. The United States is built on top of a graveyard of giants. In the 19th century, as settlers moved west, reclaiming the Tartarian ruins, they dug into the burial mounds of the Ohio Valley and the Mississippi. Open the newspaper archives, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Scientific American. Between 1850 and 1920, there are thousands, literally thousands,
of reported discoveries of giant skeletons. Skeleton of a giant found in mounds. 8-foot skeleton discovered with massive copper armor. Skulls with double rows of teeth. These were not tabloids. These were the respectable papers of the day. They reported these finds as facts. It was common knowledge that an ancient race of giants once ruled America. Abraham Lincoln himself, in a speech at Niagara Falls in 1848, said, "The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed at Niagara as ours do now." So where did the bones go? Enter the Smithsonian Institution. Established in 1846, the Smithsonian became the gatekeeper of American history. And there is a mountain of testimony from local historians and excavators who claim that when they found giant bones, the Smithsonian agents arrived. They took the bones away for study, and they were never seen again. There is a document known as the Powell Doctrine, named after John Wesley Powell, the director of the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian. The doctrine reportedly stated that no anthropological discovery could be accepted if it contradicted the theory of Darwinian evolution or the timeline of the Native Americans being the first inhabitants. Giants did not fit the timeline. Giants implied a different history. Giants implied Tartaria. So the bones were lost, crushed, dumped into the Atlantic Ocean. The narrative was cleansed. Why hide the giants?
Because if you admit that a superior, larger, stronger race existed before us, the narrative of progress collapses. We are taught that we are the peak of evolution. We are the smartest, the strongest, the most advanced. But the existence of the giants suggests that we are a diminished species, that we are the runts of the litter, that we are physically devolving, living in the ruins of our betters. This connects deeply to the mud flood theory. If the atmosphere changed, if the pressure dropped, or the oxygen levels decreased after the cataclysm, it would be biologically impossible for giant organisms to survive. We know that in the prehistoric era, there were giant dragonflies, giant sloths, giant ferns. This was due to higher atmospheric pressure and oxygen. If the Tartarian age had a similar atmospheric composition, perhaps maintained by the Antiquitech towers ionizing the air, then giants could thrive. But when the towers fell, when the firmament was breached or the climate shifted, the big air went away. The giants began to suffocate. They became sterile. They died out. Or they were hunted down by the smaller, more adaptable survivors, us. The few who survived into the 19th century were the last of their kind, the circus freaks,
the lonely figures in the old photos? And what about the architecture? The star forts? Maybe they weren't just power plants. Maybe the massive walls were necessary because the soldiers attacking them were 10 feet tall. The huge pianos found in old museums, maybe they weren't duets for two people. Maybe they were for one person with a massive handspan. The Tartarian king depicted in statues often holds a lion like a house cat. We think it's symbolism. Maybe it's scale. By erasing the giants, the controllers broke our spirit. They made us believe we are small, weak, and alone. They cut our connection to the mythology of the past, the Greek titans, the Norse frost giants, the biblical Nephilim. They turned history into a fairy tale so that we wouldn't go looking for our own DNA. But the doors remain, the steps remain. Every time you struggle to open a massive brass door in a downtown bank, every time you feel dwarfed by the ceiling of a library, you are feeling the phantom memory of the Titans. You are a squatter in the house of a giant. But if the giants ruled the continents, what lay beyond the borders? If the maps of Tartaria showed a world connected, where did that connection end? To understand the true scope of the empire and why it had to be hidden, we must go to the edge of the world. We must go to the one place that is still, to this day, off limits to the common man, the ice wall and the lands beyond.
Look at a map of the world today. You see the continents. You see the oceans. And at the bottom, you see a white, frozen blob. Antarctica. We are told it is a desolate wasteland, a place of penguins and ice. We are told it was discovered only in the last 200 years. We are told there is nothing there but snow. But ask yourself this: in a world where nations fight over every inch of sand, every drop of oil, and every rocky island, why does nobody own Antarctica? There is a treaty, the Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, at the height of the Cold War, when the US and the Soviet Union were threatening to nuke each other, when they couldn't agree on the color of the sky. They somehow agreed on one thing: nobody goes to Antarctica. No military bases, no colonization, no resource extraction, just science. To this day, it is the only place on Earth that is off limits to the free traveler. You can go to North Korea. You can go to war zones. But try to sail a private boat to Antarctica without permission, and you will be met by a military ship. What are they guarding? The Tartaria theory suggests that the map we are shown is incomplete.
It suggests that the ice wall is not the end of the world, but the beginning of the next one. Let us go back to the maps of the Old World. The Piri Rice map of 1513, the Orphan's Fine map of 1531. These maps are famous anomalies. They depict Antarctica before it was covered in ice. They show rivers, they show mountain ranges, they show forests, they show animals. Mainstream historians scratch their heads. It's just a lucky guess, they say. Or maybe they mapped the coastline under the ice using magical sonar. But there is a simpler explanation. Antarctica was not frozen during the time of the Tartarian Empire. It was a temperate continent. It was habitable, and perhaps it was the bridge to something else. Enter Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Byrd was not a conspiracy theorist. He was the most decorated officer in the U.S. Navy, an explorer, a hero. In 1946, right after World War II, the U.S. military launched Operation High Jump. They said it was a training mission, but they sent an aircraft carrier, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and 4,700 men to the South Pole. They were outfitted for a war against whom? Penguins? Byrd returned early. The mission was a failure. In a report to the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, Byrd gave a cryptic warning. He said that in the event of a new war, the United States would be attacked by aircraft that can fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. But it is his alleged secret diary that contains the true bombshell. In it, Byrd describes flying beyond the South Pole. He doesn't see ice. He sees green valleys. He sees forests. He sees woolly mammoths, yes, mammoths, grazing in the grass. He sees a shimmering city of crystal and rainbow light. He describes landing and meeting a civilization, tall, blonde, advanced humans who speak with German-sounding accents. They tell him they are the Ariani, the guardians of the inner world. They tell him they are watching the surface world destroy itself with atomic weapons. Is this fiction? A hallucination? Or was Byrd the first modern man to rediscover the breakaway civilization of Tartaria? The theory goes like this. When the reset began, when the mud floods came, or the parasite class invaded, the elites of Tartaria, or perhaps the most advanced faction, did not die. They retreated. They went south.
They went past the ice barriers, through the summer gate, to the lands beyond the poles. Wait, lands beyond? Look at the Gleason's Standard Map of the World, 1892. It is an azimuthal equidistant projection, the flat Earth map. But look at the edge. There are other maps, like the Japanese map found in a temple, or the maps described in the book the Iron Republic, that show our known continents, America, Europe, Africa, Asia, as just one pond in a much larger system. They depict other continents beyond the ice ring, massive land masses with names like Asgard, Liberia, Hestia. What if the Earth is not a lonely ball in space, but an infinite plane, or at least a much, much larger realm? What if the ice wall is just the fence around our nursery? The suppression of Tartaria is directly linked to this geography. If you know there is infinite land, infinite resources, and free energy beyond the ice, you cannot be controlled. Scarcity is the mechanism of slavery. We are running out of oil. We are running out of food. There is no more room. This fear keeps us working. It keeps us fighting wars for resources. But if you knew that just a few thousand miles south, there are continents bigger than North America, untouched, lush, and full of gold, would you stay here and pay taxes? Would you listen to the politicians? No, you would build a boat. You would go. That is why the treaty exists. That is why the military patrols the 60th parallel. They are the prison guards. And the dome? The Tartarian architecture suggests a deep knowledge of acoustics and vibration, which implies they understood the physics of an enclosed system, the firmament. If the world is enclosed, then the stars are not distant suns, but luminaries within the system. The energy of the ether is the energy of the dome itself. The star forts harvested this local energy. When the controllers took over, they had to change the cosmology. They gave us the heliocentric model. They made the universe infinite and the Earth tiny. They made us feel like dust motes in a random explosion. Why? Because if you are dust in an infinite void, you are meaningless. But if you are at the center of a designed system, protected by a barrier, standing on a stationary plane, you are special. You are significant. The Tartarians knew this. Their buildings reflected the stars. Their cities were aligned with the movement of the luminaries. They lived in harmony with the clock. The reset wasn't just about destroying buildings. It was about breaking the clock. They froze the connection to the outer lands, perhaps literally with weather warfare, causing the Ice Age in Antarctica. They burned the maps. They killed the giants who could walk across the ice. And they left us here in the middle of the map, thinking this is all there is. But the anomalies remain. The pilots who report flying into spatial distortions near the poles. The satellite images of Antarctica that are blurred or blacked out. the frantic visits of world leaders, religious patriarchs, presidents, elites to Antarctica in recent years.
Why did the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church go to Antarctica to bless a tiny wooden church? Why did John Kerry go there on election day? Why did Buzz Aldrin get medevaced out after seeing something that allegedly made him tweet, "We are all in danger, it is evil itself"? Are they visiting the ruins of the ancestors? Are they negotiating with the breakaway civilization? Or are they checking the locks on the prison door? The ice wall is the final piece of the puzzle. It is the physical boundary of the lie. And if the Tartarians are still out there watching us from beyond the ice, what are they waiting for? Are they waiting for us to wake up? Or are they waiting for the next reset to wipe the slate clean once again? We have looked at the architecture, the mud, the giants, and the map. Now we must assemble the timeline. We must look at how they did it, how they took a global, high-tech, spiritual civilization and turned it into a factory of amnesiacs in less than 100 years. We must look at the mechanics of the reset.
How do you steal a timeline? It seems impossible. You might say, my grandfather would have told me. His father would have told him. We rely on oral tradition, on books, on the continuity of memory to anchor us in reality. But memory is fragile, and a break in continuity, just one generation wide, is enough to erase 1,000 years of truth. We have spoken of the physical destruction, the fires, the dynamite, the mud. But the physical destruction was only the hardware reset. To truly control the world, the controllers needed a software reset. They needed to overwrite the collective mind of the human race. This process is what researchers call the chronological reset. It began with the books. In the 16th and 17th centuries, a scholar named Joseph Scaliger, and later a Jesuit named Dionysius Petavius, sat down to create the timeline of history that we use today. They are the ones who decided when Rome fell. They are the ones who decided when Egypt rose. But there was a problem. There were massive gaps. There were inconsistencies. A Russian mathematician named Anatoly Fomenko has proposed a radical theory known as the new chronology. After analyzing astronomical records, star charts, and dynasties using computer modeling, he concluded that our history is much shorter than we are told. He suggests that the Dark Ages, that mysterious 1,000-year period where nothing happened, where technology went backward, where people allegedly forgot how to build roads, never happened. Fomenko argues that these 1,000 years were inserted. They are phantom time, a buffer zone created by the Jesuits and the historians of the Reset to push the true events of the past farther back, making them seem like ancient myths rather than recent history. If Fomenko is right, then the ancient Rome we admire might have existed just 500 or 600 years ago. The medieval castles might have been the functioning fortresses of the Tartarian Empire mere centuries ago. Jesus Christ might have lived in the 12th century. By stretching time, the controllers successfully hid the proximity of the Golden Age. They made us believe that high technology and grand architecture were things of the distant, unattainable past, rather than the legacy of our great-great-grandparents. But changing the calendar wasn't enough. They had to change the language. Have you ever looked at an old text from the 1600s or 1700s? The font is strange. The S looks like an F. The grammar is dense. But go back further, and the scripts become indecipherable to the common man. There is a theory that a Babel event, a confusion of tongues, was artificially induced. Following the reset, the unified language of Tartaria was fractured into dozens of national languages. This served two purposes: divide and conquer, and isolation. If a Frenchman can't read a Russian book, he can't compare notes on the history of the empire. If an American can't read Latin, he can't access the original scientific texts. They created a barrier of language to lock the truth away in the ivory towers of academia, accessible only to the initiated few. And then they built the prisons. We call them schools.
Before the mid-19th century, education was local, family-based, or apprenticeship-based. You learned from a master. You learned logic, rhetoric, and how to think. But after the mud flood in the mid-1800s, a new system was imported from Prussia, the Prussian education system. It was not designed to create thinkers. It was designed by the military state to create obedient soldiers and factory workers. It introduced the bell, just like in a factory. It introduced strict segmentation of subjects, so you learn history in one box and math in another, never seeing the connection between the geometry of the star forts and the history of the wars. They took the children of the orphans, they put them in rows, and they repeated the lie until it became the truth. Repeat after me. The pyramids were tombs. The star forts were bunkers. The cathedrals were churches. The giants are myths. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Repetition, memorization, regurgitation. Any child who questioned the narrative, who asked, "Why are the basement windows buried?" was shamed. They were failed. They were weeded out. The universities became the gatekeepers. The Smithsonian, the Royal Society, the Vatican Archives. These institutions were not established to reveal truth, but to curate it, to filter it. They introduced the concept of expertise. Don't trust your eyes, they said. Trust the expert. The expert has a PhD. The expert knows better than you. If you see a stone block that weighs 1,000 tons and has laser precision cuts, your eyes tell you, high technology. But the expert says, copper chisels and ropes. And because we are trained to obey authority, we suppress our own perception and accept the lie. This is the gaslighting of the human race. They also introduced the hero narrative.
to explain the advanced technology they found. They couldn't admit it was inherited. So, they invented inventors. We are told that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Guglielmo Marconi invented the radio. But in almost every case, there is a lawsuit. There is a dispute. There is evidence that the technology already existed or was stolen from someone else. What if these men were not inventors, but patentees? What if they were the fronts chosen by the controllers to release the recovered Antiquitech back to the public, but in a controlled, metered, and profitable way? They took the wireless, free energy ether technology of Tartaria, stripped it down, put a meter on it, and sold it to us as electricity. They took the healing frequencies of the cathedrals and replaced them with Rockefeller medicine, petrochemical pills, and surgery. They monetized the reset. And what about the books that told the truth? They were banned and burned, but some survived.
They burned them. The 20th century saw the greatest destruction of literature in human history. The world wars were not just about land, they were about targeting the archives. The libraries of Europe were firebombed. The museums of Baghdad were looted. The Cultural Revolution in China destroyed thousands of years of texts. Whenever a regime change happens, the first thing to go is the history of the previous era. Year zero. They replaced the leather-bound codices of the giants with cheap paperbacks printed on acid paper that crumbles in 50 years. They digitized knowledge, making it editable, deletable, and censorable with the click of a button. We moved from a history written in stone, which lasts forever, to a history written on paper, which burns, to a history written in digital code, which can be rewritten invisibly. And now we are here. We are the descendants of the survivors. We are the children of the orphan trains, grown up. We walk through the streets of cities we did not build, using technology we do not fully understand, worshipping a timeline that was invented by monks in the 1600s. We are suffering from collective amnesia. But the cracks are forming in the facade. The internet, ironically the tool of the controllers, became the tool of the awakening. For the first time, a researcher in Russia can compare maps with a researcher in Brazil. We can share photos of the mud flood windows. We can translate the old texts. The spell is breaking. They tried to bury the buildings. They tried to burn the books. They tried to dumb down the children. But they couldn't destroy everything. The stone still speaks. The frequency still hums in the silence. And deep in our DNA, the memory of the golden age is stirring. We are realizing that we are not a cancer on this planet. We are not a primitive ape that got lucky. We are the fallen royalty of a majestic empire, and we have been robbed of our inheritance. The question is no longer, did Tartaria exist? The evidence is overwhelming. The question is, now that we know, what do we do?
We have walked a long road together in the dark. We have stood in the shadow of the capitals and realized they were not built by horse and buggy. We have traced the maps of a vanished empire across the plains of Eurasia. We have dug through the mud of the 19th century and found the buried windows of a world that was drowned. We have looked into the eyes of the orphans, the last survivors of a reset, and seen the confusion of a generation forced to inherit a graveyard. We have watched the magnificent cities of the world fairs burn, and we have felt the hum of the star forts fall silent. And now we stand here in the 21st century, holding the pieces of a puzzle that we were never meant to solve. The question that haunts us is no longer, did it happen? The stones speak too loudly to deny. The question is, why? Why go to such lengths? Why burn the libraries? Why dynamite the cities? Why invent 1,000 years of phantom time? Why traumatize a species with war and scarcity? The answer is the most dangerous truth of all. They didn't hide Tartaria to hide the land. They didn't hide it just to steal the gold or the technology. They hid it to hide you from yourself. If you believe you are a random accident of evolution, a primitive ape struggling to survive on a dying rock, you are easy to control. You will work for paper money. You will fight for oil. You will beg for medicine. You will accept that disease, poverty, and war are the natural state of humanity. But if you know the truth, the game changes. If you know that just a few centuries ago, humanity lived in a golden age of resonance, health, and abundance. If you know that we built cathedrals that healed the body and towers that pulled energy from the sky. If you know that we were giants, both in stature and in spirit, then you cannot be enslaved. You realize that the scarcity we live in is artificial. It is a cage built of lies. The suppression of Tartaria was a suppression of human potential. They disconnected us from the Earth's grid. They disconnected us from the ether, and most importantly, they disconnected us from our own history of greatness. They made us think we are small,
so that we would stay small. But the apocalypse is not the end of the world. The word apocalypse comes from the Greek apocalypsis, which means unveiling. It means lifting the veil. We are living in the apocalypse right now. The veil is lifting.
The mud is washing away. The internet, the very tool designed to monitor us, has become the Library of Alexandria reborn. Millions of minds are comparing notes, sharing photos, translating texts. The global consciousness is waking up from the anesthesia of the reset. We look at the ugly, square, concrete boxes of modern architecture, buildings that degrade the soul, and we feel a revulsion. We look at the beautiful, harmonic stone arches of the old world, and we feel a longing. That longing is not nostalgia, it is memory. It is your DNA vibrating in sympathy with the past. You remember a time when the world was beautiful. You remember a time when the water was structured and the air was charged. You remember a time when we were not divided by nations, but united by a frequency. Tartaria is not just a place in the past. It is a vision of the future. We cannot go back. We cannot undo the mud flood. We cannot bring back the giants or the burning libraries. The timeline has been severed, and we are the orphans of that tragedy. But we are also the inheritors. The buildings are still here. The star forts are still here. The physics of the ether is still waiting to be rediscovered. We are the builders who forgot how to build, but we are remembering. So, the next time you walk past an old post office with giant columns or a cathedral with a copper dome, stop. Do not just look at it, feel it. Put your hand on the stone. Listen to the silence. It is not empty silence. It is a pregnant silence. It is the silence of a machine that has been turned off, waiting for the operator to return, waiting for you to return. The abyss of history is deep. It is dark. It is terrifying. But it is only by descending into the abyss that we can find the foundation upon which to build something new. Do not accept the narrative. Question the timeline. Doubt the experts. Trust your eyes. Trust your intuition. The empire is gone, but the empire is within us. Thank you for journeying into the dark with me. If this journey has sparked a light in your mind, if it has made you look at your city with new eyes, then the reset has failed. This is abyssal history. The past is never dead. It isn't even past. Sleep well, and when you wake up, keep your eyes open.